Hello, welcome back to Blender Sushi Live Noding. In this episode, we're gonna revisit one of the Sverchok nodes called Texture Viewer. So apparently this node just got updated, and then once again it's got a few different changes. The first thing that I noticed that's actually really different is that this node is no longer like taking any kind of numbers. You need to kind of give it like the right numbers. Like the first ones give you need to provide with 64 by 64 values. The second one 128 by 128 kind of value. So you need to give the exact value in order for these nodes to work. So that's one thing to keep in mind. I'll show you what I mean. I'll start with a plane. So this plane node, we know that this guy is gonna generate a plane based on the numbers here. If I'm using like a viewer draw, it's gonna be more clear what I'm talking about. So by default it's 2 by 2, right? 2 points by 2 points. If I give it like 64, I get 64 by 64 points, and that's the value that's this texture viewer node's gonna take if we are working on a 64. This is like extra small, small, medium, large, and extra large. Extra large is like if you're working with 1024 by 1024 pixels, the texture viewer is gonna display that. Let's try with 64 by 64 value. Let me think. So by default, this guy will show the result over here. Let me try just pipe it in like that. It's gonna complain. It's gonna give like red color. Why is that? Because by default, it's only expecting like a float input. We can't just plug in like a vector position like this. If I'm using like vector out, kind of separating the data and output the x value into the float, I'm gonna get something. There's like a kind of black and then all white, and same thing with y, but the z give you like a black because it's all zero. So of course, as you already know, the texture viewer will actually display a value between, if I'm not wrong, between 0 and 1 for any kind of texture, such as if we are using like a vector noise, for example. The vertices here can come from the plane because it's 64 by 64. If I plug that into and the output goes into this guy as a scalar, I should get some kind of result. There you go. It's like a noise value, and we can randomize the seed. We can use like a Voronoi, change the value, and then if you want to see something that looks more like a Voronoi, for example, you can use a vector math and just scale it. Just multiply by scalar and then just play with this value, and you will start to see the noise that you're familiar with, such as this Voronoi, for example. Here we go. I'll save this real quick. So this is a texture viewer update. One thing that I mentioned already, that you need to make sure the number here, the dimension 64 by 64, is exactly matching this texture viewer, because otherwise it's not gonna work. If we are using, for example, 40 by 40, this guy will stop working and will not generate anything. That's a little bit, I think, a little bit unfortunate, I think, but you can actually go around that limitations if you set the x and y dimensions to match the width and height here. What I mean is, if I'm using like integer value now for the x and y. Oh, by the way, you notice the glitch. The UI glitch, sometimes this texture viewer gives you like a glitch somehow, but normally it's, once it's refreshed or it's gonna fix itself, so don't worry too much about that. Just focus on the node. Let's say for the plane itself, for this number, we're gonna give it like a value maybe 40 by 40 pixels, and we plug that into the X, and we also do the same thing for this guy. We should actually get a result if we turn on custom texture and then try to update it. Oh, actually I made a mistake. Instead of plugging into the vertices, I'm plugging into the step. So I'll correct that real quick. So there we go. I think it's working now. So this actually like this is nice. You can have like a custom texture that's maybe not even not in the square dimensions. For example, you want it maybe a little bit like more like landscape. Now you can actually do that, and you get a preview nicely here. I actually really like that kind of interactivity. That's one thing that I really like about node-based procedural kind of workflow, is that you can always make changes to the parameters and you can see the result right away. It's all very interactive and easy to work with. You're not like for example, if you're like making any of this primitive, for example, you're making a cube, and you know that this cube you can adjust it from here. There's like this parameter that's like a once-off thing. You can maybe generate UV or change it. In this case, for the box, you can only change the radius, but once you're done with that, you can't change it anymore. So that's for me is kind of limiting. Same thing like with cylinder, you can change the vertices and radius and the depth, but only at the beginning, and then you stop work and you start working with other thing, and you're no longer able to change the parameters. So that's kind of limiting for me. So the same thing with any nodes in Sverchok or maybe like animation nodes. I really like the ability to be able to make changes to parameter, and then the things will update immediately. That's things that we often take for granted, but this is actually really powerful. Okay, so the custom texture, and if we give the width and the height to match the nodes, this guy will work nicely, just like before. If you turn off the custom text, none of this thing will work unless you give it the exact number, like 64, 128, 256, 512, and 1024. So be careful with that. For now, I'll just gonna use the custom texture, and that seems pretty works pretty well for me. And what else I want to show you? We know that it can work in black and white, RGB, or RGBA. If we give it like 4 colors, RGB, if we give it like a vector, for example, it will work nicely. There's actually this new options that's called pass. If we hover over it, it says transfer pixels to image viewer. So if I turn that on, the cool thing about it is if we switch to image editor, there will be a texture for us, and you can just save it from here. So that's a procedural texture being generated on the fly. So that's really nice. Even though it can be slow depending on your computer processor, I think, but still it's pretty interactive, and it's a really nice feature. So if we try, for example, I want to give it a random vector. If I'm giving like, I use the RGB and plug this vector into it, there's one unfortunate problem here, that this guy will not work unless you give it the right value. We used to be able to just scrub these numbers and it will fill up the pixels. Let's say we have like 20 by 20 pixel, that means we have 400. If I slide this, if I change this to 400, so now it's working. So you need to kind of make sure the number is correct. The way around that limitation is to just use math. Oops, we got a lot of glitch. How to refresh this? Gonna use math and just gonna multiply this number using the math and plug this into the count. Now I can make changes to the dimensions and it should update accordingly. So I like this kind of interactive ability to just quickly make changes and then everything will update accordingly. So this is kind of the workflow that I recommend you to use. So show or pass, I kind of wish this can work together, but this seems like either one of them. So the node might have a little bit of bug as well because I can't click it at the moment. Maybe I need to turn off the pass and then click on the show. Yeah. I think that can be improved. But other than that, this is yeah, this is how these nodes actually works. You have now the ability to view the image directly in here, which is really nice. What else here? We can use things like vector turbulence. Of course, I already showed you this before. Just want to test it out. So vector, this is like a 3 value, so RGB will work. So that's the result. Let's switch to pass. Okay, we have a result here. Very nice, and I believe this works pretty fast. So I'll try give it a like weird dimensions, maybe 440 times 220, and it should work nicely. This is the turbulence texture. It looks quite nice actually. Wait for a few seconds. 400 by 200 is like 80,000 pixels, and these guys seem to slow down. I don't know if my computer can handle 1024 by 1024, like 2K of pixel, maybe a little bit heavy. Yeah, maybe this also not so good for Sverchok. Let me check. Width is 400, length is seems to be printing something. Okay, finally it's finished calculating. So yeah, that's the results. Quite nice texture. I think I'm gonna keep this for my viewer for my video. But that's pretty much it. I think this guy is complaining about the size. Vector turbulence. Well, yeah, I think it's a little bit more strict with the dimensions, like I said. So be careful with that. Other than that, this node really does the job as you expected. It's just sometimes because we have like restriction with the dimension now, we have to make sure the dimension of value that we are passing in is the same total number as the one that we set up in the nodes. That's something you need to keep in mind. Other than that, this works really well. So that's pretty much it for this live noding. Hopefully this is useful for you. If you have any question, suggestion, any feedback, let me know in the comment section below. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next video.